This is the news that we are waking up to for Saturday, December the 7th, 2024. This is day 1018 of the full-scale invasion by Russia in its war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. Now, this is a special Saturday Syria update, though we will touch on some international happenings. I want to point out that Monday through Friday, news we are waking up to is exclusively available to the paid Patreon subscribers. But today's special Saturday edition will be posted to YouTube and be made public. So please share the link, everybody. Couple things first. In last night's drone attacks on Ukraine, the Russian Federation sent 14 attack drones of the Shahed 131, 136 type against the country, 7 of which were taken out by air defense, 6 of which were taken out with electronic warfare, 1 of which was returned to sender. That's a 100% interception rate. But what's worrying, of course, is that every night this week we saw the Russians send about 3/5 of what they normally send on a night. And now this, nothing. This is just to suss out where air defense is, right? So my concern is that tonight we are going to see a massive, massive missile and drone attack on the territory of Ukraine. And time will tell. Today in Belarus, Russian President Vladimir Putin is signing a security agreement with a mutual defense pact with the Belarusian dictator Lukashenko. Now, in the past few days, we have seen some real theatrics from this Laurel and Hardy pair right here. Lukashenko gets in the news and says, Belarus will never be part of Russia. If Russia tries to take Belarus, it will mean war. This is nonsense. Lukashenko spends every day of his life subverting the sovereignty of Belarus, increasing the use of the Russian language, keeping the army under-equipped and undermanned, weak. 60,000 people for the whole country. Further, he just, in the most fawning piece of staged bullshit, he said in an open press conference and in a direct address to President Putin, I don't want to appear impudent, but sir, we would very much like to request the deployment of new weapon systems on the territory of Belarus, particularly the Oreshnik missile, the so-called intermediate-range ballistic missile that Russia fired on Dnipro. Now, look, these things cost $120 million apiece. They are a PR stunt by the Russian Federation to intimidate the West. Russia doesn't have them. If they had them, Kyiv would be dust, as Putin threatened it would be. They don't have them. This is just another bluff to bluff the weak West into believing that Russia is not the paper bear that it is and that it's on fire. Russia, for its part, is pulling out of Syria. And that's where we want to spend our focus, because Putin has spent billions of dollars shoring up the Assad regime in Syria. And the loss of Syria is a major geopolitical blow to Russia and its partners in Tehran. The Assad regime has been propped up by three foreign sources: Hezbollah, Russia, and Iran. None of them can come to Syria's aid right now, to Assad's aid, right? Here we can see elements of a Russian S-400 system and a Tor A1. That's the thermobaric weapon that they use on the battlefield here in Ukraine. These are being evacuated from Hama, which just fell to the rebels on Thursday, and headed to the port of, I believe it's Lakia. And from there, they are likely to be loaded on a ship and taken out of Syria. it appears that the Russians have abandoned their airbase at Khmeimim. There were only 5 planes there in yesterday's satellite photos. And they have definitely abandoned the naval port at Tartus. All of the Russian warships are out of there at sea. Where they're headed, we don't know. They could be headed nearby to a friendly port like Algiers just to wait this thing out. Or they may be headed home all the way through the Straits of Gibraltar back up to the Baltic Sea. Now, in Syria, we're seeing images like this all over the place. The images of Bashar al-Assad and the monuments that he's made to himself and his father, the dictator before him, are being torn down by the people and dragged through the streets. For their part, the Syrian army is trying to bomb bridges to slow the advance of the rebels, but it doesn't seem to be working. The Russians are fleeing homes even as we speak. These are a Ka-52 Alligator helicopter and an Mi-8 Russian helicopter that are taking the commanders, the Russian commanders, out of homes right now. The rebels are said to be 25 kilometers from homes and advancing. Some elements of the jihadi insurgent movement are already there, and there are some pitched battles happening outside the city. But the main force is still about 25 kilometers away. And they're in this small town, 25 miles north of Homs, 25 kilometers north of Homs, about 45 kilometers south of Hama. In this town, as we have seen in other places like in Hama, the jihadis are being greeted as liberators by the locals, at least some of the locals. People are in the streets cheering. There are reports that there is a general feeling of liberation along this M5 corridor, the main highway from Aleppo to Jordan. There is a general feeling of liberation in these communities all along there. Here's what that looks like, right? Here's Aleppo in the north. Homs is where the rebels are headed. Now you can see on this map, Hama is just about here, and they have come down 45 kilometers from there, just on the outskirts of Homs, and battles are begun. Although we're already seeing the Russian commanders flee. Those helicopters were headed to Damascus. That's down here. Now, in the very south of the country, at the end of the M5 highway, HTS supporters have captured a military base and the border crossing to Jordan now. And so it appears that the goal is to take the M5, cut Damascus off from the rest of the country, as well as Lataika. That's the port where the S-400 was headed to. And it's a major military base and port for the Syrian army. Here is where Tartus is, the abandoned naval port. And very near to Latakia is the Khmeimim air base, which again appears to have been abandoned by the Russians. So the Russians are on their way out, and they are advising their citizens to get out. We've seen video of Russians fleeing from Hama and Homs and Damascus. This guy, Hassan Abdul Ghani, the opposition military commander, is on the TV, and you can see this is being reported by Al Jazeera, is on the TV saying that it's over, that the criminal regime of Bashar al-Assad is ended today. There are rumors, unsubstantiated rumors at this time, Saturday morning, December the 7th, that there was an attempted coup overnight in Damascus and that Assad may have fled the country. That's not confirmed at this time. Now, in the UN, you got to look at this with me. This is the Russian envoy to the UN and the U.S. envoy to the UN. And Vasily here is essentially blaming the United States both for the war in Ukraine and for funding the rebels in Syria, which the United States has not done. And he is claiming that this is a dire situation, and that the United States conspired to stab the Syrian people in the back. As if this situation were not created by the Russians. The Russians started the Ukraine war, which led them to pull their men and machines out of Syria, weakening the Assad regime they'd been propping up. They then started a war between Iran, Hezbollah, and Israel on Putin's birthday, October 7th. Let's not forget that, right? Putin was behind that to distract from Ukraine. No two ways about it. And Israel has kicked Iran in the balls and decimated Hezbollah in Lebanon. Neither of them are coming to Syria's aid. So rather than blame himself, first for propping up this murderous dictatorship, and secondly, for then creating the geopolitical circumstances in which the dictatorship could fall, is laughable in itself. But he goes on to say that the campaign of brutal area attacks must stop and the rebels must adhere to international law. This is the same son of a bitch whose government is making brutal aerial attacks against the people of Ukraine for 1,018 days in a fucking row, who have flouted international law and the UN Charter by targeting civilians, targeting dams, targeting the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, the civilian energy infrastructure of this country, so that I am left without power 8 hours a day. Please, the hypocrisy is unending with these people. Thank God this guy was there from the US, because he took the time to remind us that the Assad regime has launched 50 chemical attacks against its own people in the last 10 years, 13 years of war. 50 times they have hit their own people with chemical weapons. This murderous bastard and his Russian counterparts are responsible for the deaths of over 600,000 Syrians. They are responsible for jailing 200,000 people as political prisoners because they dare speak against Bashar al-Assad. They are responsible for leveling whole villages, cities, communities, towns in carpet-bombing genocidal attacks that have resulted in half the population, 10 million people, being displaced, 3 million refugees in Turkey alone. They are responsible for destabilizing the entire situation and breaking the Chemical Weapons Convention, of which Syria is a signatory. I had forgotten about the chemical weapons, and we haven't talked about it, but we should. This is a photograph of a child getting respiratory therapy after the last chemical weapons attack in 2017, which you may remember, Putin was very upset because Donald Trump sent a bunch of Tomahawk missiles in to wreck the Syrian army positions after this chemical weapons attack, because Trump said chemical weapons was a red line for the U.S. Bang. What's the history of chemical weapons in Syria? It's thought that in 2013, they had the third largest stockpile of chemical weapons in the world, right behind the U.S. and Russia. It is believed that they had over 1,000 tons of sarin, VX, and other neurological compounds. Now, these toxins, when in 2013 Syria signed the Convention Against Chemical Weapons, these were supposed to be destroyed under the auspices of an international organization that sees to that kind of thing. It is thought That's over 90% of the stockpile was destroyed. However, that leaves 1 to 9% of the stockpile that could still exist. Clearly, they weren't all destroyed because in 2017 they were used on the people. How much of this poison there is left in Syria is an unknown. What the rebels are going to do with it if they capture it will be a huge sign to the world of their seriousness in attempting to modernize Syria and bring Syria back into the modern world. If they turn around and use these chemical weapons against the Kurds, they are the butchers that their detractors are saying they are. If they turn the chemical weapons over to the international community for destruction, they may just be the saviors of Syria. That remains to be seen. But they may have the chance because according to Sky News Arabia, they are reporting that Russia has informed Damascus that any intervention will be limited as it has other priorities at this time. Let's face facts. The Russian army is a little busy right now. They can't exactly come to the aid of Syria. And even there are very few troops left in Africa, which is where they were going to pull these guys from. If they do that, then they jeopardize their positions in Africa, and we risk seeing new violence flare in Africa. Russia right now is spread so thin. This house of cards is starting to fall. This could be the first serious domino in a chain of dominoes. Let's hope so. Okay, guys, again, this is the news we are waking up to. Normally, it is a paid Patreon only segment, but today's special Saturday edition, spurred by the events of the day, will be made available publicly. If you would like to get a program like this in your inbox every morning, please join the Patreon. I sure could use your help. Thanks.